You're listening to Intoit from Vulture. I'm Sam Sanders. This episode, we're going to begin with a game. But then, we're going to talk about that new Amazon Lord of the Rings show and why so many people are so angry about black hobbits. Black hobbits. I mean, I love the idea. Anywho, first, the game. I'm playing the game this week with two of the stars of the new Amazon Prime Video original series, A League of Their Own, a show that has, thankfully, zero hobbits. Hello, hello, hello to both my guests. Thanks for being here.
You have to wait for season 2, Sam.
Yeah. You never know. A hobbit might pop up.
If a hobbit is in A League of Their Own season 2, what is that hobbit's position on the team?
Well, that's a poll that we'll be asking our viewership later this week.
Can't wait for it. Can't wait for it. First things first, tell our listeners who you both are.
I'm Chante Adams, and I play Max Chapman in A League of Their Own.
And I'm Abbi Jacobson. I play Carson Shaw in A League of Their Own.
We're going to get back to some discussion of the show in a bit. But first, I want you both to play a game with me. We call this game Intoit, Not Intoit. It's very simple. I share a few headlines from the week, from the zeitgeist, and you just tell me if you are into these stories or not into these stories, and why. All right, here is the first question. Are we into or not into Cher accidentally calling the Queen of England a cow instead of a goat in a most royal emoji fail? Did y'all see this?
What? No.
You didn't see this?
No, that's so funny. So she was like, she's the cow.
Yeah, she wanted to say that, like, oh, R.I.P. Queen of England, you were the goat. But instead of emojiing a goat, she emojied a cow.
She emojied a cow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean...
You mean?
A cow is a very important animal, especially to the human race. So...
And while I'm not really for people being like called cows usually, I would say I'm into it because feels very innocent.
Yeah. I also love when Cher messes up because it's never really a mess up. It's just adding to the mystique of Cher, who we love.
Yes, yes.
So here's the whole tweet. Quote, "Am sad about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. I had honor of meeting her. I was in long line of people waiting to meet her, yet when she got to me, she asked me pertinent questions and seemed genuinely interested in talking to me. I'm proud she was a cow emoji and happy she had a great sense of humor." She meant well.
I think she did. I'm going to say into it. She started a new trend. It's a new thing. We're all cows.
Yes, cows. We stand. You know, I'm going to say I'm into Cher getting this wrong when talking about the Queen of England because I am of the school that even as the Queen dies, we don't ever need to take time to honor the vestiges of colonialism or imperialism or monarchy. I've been one of those people happily watching Black Twitter and Irish Twitter kind of rip the monarchy to shreds. It's something. What parts of the fallout have you been most, I don't know, impressed or amused by?
Well, there was this one tweet that was like, just told my mama that the Queen died, and she was like, Latifah. So it's just been little things like that.
All right. So then if Queen Elizabeth isn't our queen, what queen would you mourn the most if they died?
Sorry,
Yeah,
what was the question?
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay.
Dare I say Queen Latifah and Queen Beyonce have contributed more to the zeitgeist, to the culture, than Elizabeth ever could? Am I okay saying that?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, like, without a doubt, positively.
Yeah, there's that. Okay, there's that.
Like,
Queen Elizabeth,
the Queen has contributed,
she
but
has
maybe
contributed.
not in a positive way.
She has
Queen Elizabeth, you know, she's Queen Elizabeth, but did she make single ladies?
Come on.
No. Did she make living single? No.
I hear you. That is the right take. That is the right take. Who made single ladies? That's the Queen. All right. We're all on the same page with that. Here's the next question. Are we into or not into movie sets being haunted by the ghosts of dead actors?
Here's the thing. When I go, you won't catch me haunting one of my past sets. There's so many other things to haunt. It's like, I'm trying to haunt spaces that I couldn't access in my human form. Like,
you didn't let me in here, so I'm gonna be in here now. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I'm trying to haunt, like, the private quarters of the White House. Like, I'm trying
Lincoln
to...
bedroom in there, yes.
I'm trying to haunt the lounge at the airport that won't let me in with the
Not the
current
Centurion Lounge. Dream bigger. Dream bigger, Abby.
Not you want to haunt the Sky Lounge.
So I asked this question because there are some new reports of a movie set being haunted. The actress Ana de Armas, in the press run for her new Marilyn Monroe biopic, Blonde, she says that Marilyn Monroe's ghost haunted her and others on the set of that movie. And Ana said, quote, "I think she was happy. She would also throw things off the wall sometimes and get mad if she didn't like something. Maybe this sounds very mystical, but it is true. We all felt it." I want to ask both of you thespians, if that happened to y'all on a set, what are you doing?
I'm going to have to peace out. I don't do ghosts.
I'm just like, I think haunted feels like a negative.
Right. Like, haunted feels
it's not,
scary.
Like, she visited.
Yeah.
She came by. Like, haunted is, like, terrifying, right?
The director, Andrew Dominic, said that it took on elements of a seance.
See?
And no.
I'm not. No.
Here's the last question. This one's a doozy, or at least it's one that I love picking apart to no end. Are we into or not into Leo DiCaprio's latest love interest?
Who is it?
Yeah.
Take some guesses.
Well, it's like a really young girl, right?
Didn't he date Rihanna?
But older than his usual.
A young girl? What?
Young.
His whole thing is young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
you didn't know that?
It's like very early 20s, right?
He's usually 25 or under. And some say that when they turn 25, Leo lets him go.
Chante, you're over.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can you give us a hint?
She's a model. She comes from a celebrity family that is kind of tied to the Kardashians. She was previously in Taylor Swift's posse or squad when Taylor was doing that.
Ooh,
Her sister is Bella. Her sister is Bella.
Bella.
Last name Hadid. Last name Hadid.
Bella Hadid?
I thought her name is Bella. She dated The
There's
Weeknd.
another one.
She's dating Leonardo DiCaprio now?
There's another Hadid. Gigi Hadid.
So excited.
Gigi Hadid. Gigi
Hadid.
Y'all are, okay. She's a model. She's a big deal.
That's
she used to be with
good
Zayn.
Who is that?
I'm going to give y'all a second to Google Gigi Hadid on whatever respective device you have while I give y'all some details of this. One, according to People magazine and several unnamed sources, Gigi Hadid and Leo have been hanging out. This comes after his much-publicized breakup with supermodel Camilla Morrone. And with that news of that breakup, there was a new wave of criticism on Leo because he seems to only date women who are 25 years old or younger, and it seems as if he leaves them as soon as they hit like 25. But the gag here with this Gigi news is that she is 27, which is, I suppose, for Leo, growth?
When did she break up with The Weeknd?
So Bella dated him. Bella dated him.
Okay.
I hope The Weeknd's okay. Bella, I hope you're okay. Bella's sister, Gigi.
I hope
Gigi is
okay.
Bella's sister.
Yes. Who was previously dating Zayn of One Direction. And they have a kid together.
Is there an answer that's like, I'm like in the middle. I don't have like a guttural
that's
reaction.
Fine. Neutral is an answer. Neutral is an answer.
Neutral.
Yes, that's fine. Chante, how do you feel about this now that we kind of know who these people are?
Do we know who these people are?
I
know. Thank y'all for playing this little game. I gotta say, in general, we are spiritually aligned on all of those options. We feel the same way, and I like that.
Nice.
I like that. All right. I want to pivot now, and if we can, before I let y'all go, talk a bit more about the show. You both kind of set up what the show is and what your characters are doing there. But my biggest question for both of you, and I want to have you both answer this, how does this show, and how did this show successfully deal with race in a way that the original did not? The original A League of Their Own, it kind of nodded to race, but it didn't really deal with it. And this new reboot tackles it head on in what I think are some really smart ways. How hard was that to make the choice and then to do it?
Well, I mean, Abby can speak to if it was hard or not. But I mean, I feel like the biggest difference is that it's just included at all. You know, we only got that one little scene in the movie, which was kind of a nod to the time period and the fact that Black women weren't allowed to play in the league. But just the simple fact that we are now exploring it through a Black female lens with our show, I think is, you know, the biggest difference. Just the fact that we're here and we're telling the story in the first place.
Yeah. Abbi?
As Chante said, there's the scene from the movie that's like, there's no dialogue in this scene. And the scene we're talking about is there's a foul ball and a Black woman picks up the foul ball and chucks it back to Gina Davis. And that's the hint, the nod to the fact that Black women and women of color were not even allowed to try out for the league. This was not an option for them. That like, it's like seconds. You're like supposed to absorb that reality within this scene. And you get a little bit of it, but like, then that's it. And then nothing. And so a big thing, you know, that Will and I initially from our original conversation about doing this was, okay, this league that the movie is about is a door that opens for white women and white passing women. And it also is a door that closes to women of color. It was really like the more research we did, the more Max's character and Max's world and that part that was not included in the film opened up. And we felt like that was where we wanted to flesh out the story.
You know, in our next segment, we're going to talk with a PhD, actually, about why there's so much hand-wringing and yelling and controversy over another Amazon show trying to introduce characters of color, and that is the Lord of the Rings prequel/reboot, Rings of Power. A lot of fans seem to hate the Black Hobbits. But with y'all's show, there are accolades for, in a different world, kind of doing the same work. Why do you think that's the case? These two very different reactions to two shows trying to do the same kind of work when it comes to race.
I mean, there's accolades, but there's some other stuff too.
Oh, wait, really? Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Just the fact that we do share the same name with the movie. And so people think that we are trying to recreate or redo that. That's one thing. And then the fact that also there's a Black lead in this show. And without even watching it, people are judging it and saying that we're trying to rewrite history because Black people weren't on the team. And we're like, we know. Just watch the show. You
watch it.
And you will see.
And I don't know. I can't speak to Lord of the Rings. I haven't watched it.
I haven't either. But what I will say is that I think that for the first time, white people are struggling to see themselves in characters that don't look like them. And Black people have been dealing with that forever. So... But somehow we're still able to relate to the characters on screen. We find something that we have in common with them. And now white people are forced to do that as well. And, you know, when something is not centered around them and their experience, I think that sometimes it can, it can ruffle some feathers. But, you know, all I got to say is, hey, join the club.
Thank you both for making your show. Thank you both for hanging out on my show this week. Listeners, if you haven't watched already, go watch the new Amazon Prime Video original series, A League of Their Own. It's good. Trust me on that. Abbi, Chante, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks so much, Sam.
There's another big show out right now that tried the same kind of thing as A League of Their Own, and a lot of people hated it. I am talking about Rings of Power, that very expensive Lord of the Rings prequel, also on Amazon Prime Video.
Our ancestors were not given anything. They paid for this isle with the blood of their kin.
What the elf means.
Then if blood be the price of passage, I will pay it.
People truly got upset about black hobbits. So upset that the cast and crew of this show have had to publicly denounce Middle-earth racism. This is wild to me, but also not unexpected. People are mad about characters of color in Star Wars. They are mad about characters of color in the Game of Thrones prequel. There are even grown adults upset that Ariel is black in the new Little Mermaid.
Wish I could be part of that world.
What gives? Well, to find out, we posed this question to a PhD who studies fantasy writing. She actually studies how people of color are portrayed in fantasy. I know, very cool job.
Oh my goodness, grown men are suddenly worried about a mermaid.
Her name is Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, and she says people get so mad about this stuff because most, if not all, of the fantasy writing in the Western world, it is deeply entrenched in whiteness. And whiteness not just as the default, but whiteness as the ideal.
The only way that the European powers, kingdoms, and empires could ever stop trying to eradicate each other was to set themselves up as an entity against the rest of the world, the West versus the rest. And we certainly see that play out in a number of fantasy narratives, particularly modern fantasy.
Dr. Thomas says whiteness is so entrenched in Western fantasy that when a black character just shows up, it's shocking.
It's the black person sitting up being a knight or a mermaid that causes the hesitation. It's as much as the flutter of a dragon's wing or fairy dust. It's that profound.
I asked Dr. Thomas if this will ever change and how to watch shows like Rings of Power in spite of all those racial dynamics. But first, I had her explain to me very clearly just which hobbits and orcs and dwarves and elves got a race change.
There are actually 4 darker-skinned characters. I think there are other actors of color who are doing a superb job, but there are 4 in particular in The Lord of the Rings of Power, who have been objected to. I think most of the objections have been against Arondir, who is the black elf.
And be grateful that you need never see them again.
He's one of the immortal elves of Tolkien's Legendarium. Mm-hmm. Then we have Disa, who is one of the dwarf characters.
Sing to it properly. Each of those parts will reflect your song back to you, telling you its story, showing you what might be hidden, where to mine, where to tunnel, and where to leave the mountain untouched.
Queen Miriel of Numenor is also played by an actress of color. And I do think that beauty and desirability, racial politics will come into play in discussions there. And then finally, we have Sedok, who is one of the Harfoot characters. So the Harfoots are the predecessors of the Hobbit culture. So, so because the...
Wait, so the Hobbit's like great-granddaddy is black now?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, come on. Okay. Talk about it. I like that.
Yes. Because Tolkien says in the Legendarium that Sam Gamgee was browner. And of course, there have been people talking about that. Yeah. There's been pushback saying, oh, no, we meant browner as in tanned. I tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago. When I was a kid, every time I read a character being tall, dark, and handsome, I imagined Michael Jordan.
They didn't mean black.
Right, I thought that was Michael Jordan. Right.
They meant Ben Affleck. Dark hair.
And then you're like, dark where? Like, that's not dark to us. So it's so interesting to think about the difference in perception. I mean, black audiences supported Game of Thrones. We're huge nerds. People of color, are huge nerds. So
Listen.
we have seen and viewed and read so much that did not include us. And then finally, at this late date, we finally show up and we're not even the majority.
But do any of the critiques from these loud and angry and, in my opinion, racist Lord of the Rings fans make sense to you at all when we unpack the history of all Western fantasy? If Western fantasy is rooted in whiteness, aspirational whiteness, isn't it a reader of these books and now a viewer of these shows, aren't they in some regard actually right in saying, I am shocked to see people who didn't look like they did in the books? This actually bucks up against one of the central organizing principles of Western fantasy work. Is that ever, in your opinion, a valid critique of some of these castings?
I wouldn't call it a valid critique, but I have sympathy, and I know it's coming from an ingrained power structure who themselves have been carefully taught to see the world as white and heroic and dark and savage. That was how they were taught. However, that does mean we have an obligation as a society to begin to unlearn, right? So this is the very beginning of this.
But this is the thing. Who wants to go watch a fun fantasy show to unlearn anything? I'm going to this thing to be comforted and to almost be reassured that the fantasies of my youth still feel good and knowable to me. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I hear you. But my question about that perspective is this. What about these four characters? What is it about these four characters that makes you feel uncomfortable? They are saying the words from the script that, we can argue, right, that we can argue are or are not like Tolkien, right? We can say, okay, this, because they didn't have the rights to the Silmarillion and to many of the other previous, or many of the other Lord of the Rings and Hobbit prequel works. So, we could quibble with the writing. We can quibble with the plot. We can quibble with the production. I think it is magnificent to see how they have chosen to adapt material that many experts previously said was not adaptable because of the expanse of Tolkien's imagination and language building. Instead of having those conversations, the idea that seeing people with darker skin interrupts the fantastic dream is something that must constantly be pushed back against, because if we're erased in the imagination, then it is easier to erase us in the real world, because the imagination is the seed. It's where racist ideas are seeded.
Well, so then, okay. The next question I have for you, as someone who spent a few days now trying to figure this out myself, was the source material and was Tolkien himself racist or not? I know that's way too simple of a question, but let's try to answer it. Because in his personal life, he seemed to denounce racism, denounce anti-Semitism. He spoke out vocally against apartheid in South Africa. But a lot of his work, most of his work, has this very detailed racial coding in which race is objectively real, different races and species of these, creatures that exist. So by the standards of his time, was he in his writing progressive on race, regressive on race, or something else?
It's complicated. If you were to twist my arm and to ask me, if I could only have 10 books to take with me for the rest of my life, what are the 10? And I have all kinds of authors. I have James Baldwin's If Beale Street Could Talk on that list, but also the Silmarillion. I loved the prose. I loved the myth building. It seemed epic. It seemed grand. However, I would agree that Tolkien was a man of his time, because for all that he was progressive liberal for the standards of that time, he could have been a mentor of one of the greatest Black academics of the 20th century and refused him, Stuart Hall.
Oh, really?
Yes, the great British Jamaican sociologist. He went to Tolkien and he recounts that he was rebuffed. Tolkien did not think that he had promise. And that was heartbreaking to me as a Black professor. And to know that, wow, you really did not see me as part of your audience. And if I had come to you, certainly as a Black woman, and, with my love and interest in British literature, especially when I was younger, you would not have seen me. You probably would not have wanted to work with me. It's chilling to know that I see you, but you don't see me. And so I think that's my response to whether he was racist or not.
Yeah, yeah. We know that he had races of species and used the word race to talk about these different kinds of creatures, and they were racially coded. Is it fair to say the source material itself and the way that it classified racial categories, that's racist? That is racist? Because it's like, I'll go online and
absolutely.
Google,
Yes.
was Tolkien racist
absolutely.
or no? And it's like, no, that was kind of racist. Okay.
Yes. I can say an unequivocal yes. Like the people of Harad and Far Harad and Rune, the Easterlings, they're susceptible to evil in ways that the characters who are coded white aren't.
So you mentioned at the top of this chat that kind of all of Western fantasy work is kind of rooted in these ideas of whiteness being good and darkness or blackness being bad. Is that the way fantasy goes all across the world? Or do fantasy genres and writers and cultures outside of the UK and America do it differently?
They absolutely do it differently. We have so many young first generation African millennials all over the world who are just publishing incredible fantasy stories right now. Tomi Adeyemi, Roseanne Brown. We have Indigenous and First Nations people. So there's Sherry DeMoline's The Marrow Thieves, which won every single award in my neck of the woods in children's and young adult literature. And then finally, Latin America is magical realism. We have magical realism. Yes, yes. So we have all that. In the Caribbean, I mean, we could just shout out Pacifica. I mean, everybody else does their own thing.
This is the thing. All right, so if everybody else does their own thing, if there's a whole wide world of fantasy that is not just Western white-focused fantasy, if it is 2022 and the entire world is connected through the internet, why are so many fantasy worlds in America and the UK still white? Why are they still relying on that old model of fantasy writing and fantasy conceptualization when so much else exists? And it seems as if we're in a time where everything can be changed, because why not?
My answer to that is a viral meme from a brother from Louisiana. Let's go where the money resides, where the bunny resides. Follow the money. We have to follow the money. So people may have the best of intentions when it comes to diversity, multiculturalism, and sharing space. But money and power rule this world and humanity, unfortunately. So you can have every good intention to adapt work from the global South and from the rest of us in the West. However, when you do that, how many Jordan Peels are you going to allow? And then there are less slots, less spots, and less money for your friends to create their own multi-million-dollar projects. But when it comes down to it, sharing space means actually giving up something that you've always had. So it means giving up power, giving up the spotlight,
and giving up money.
Giving up money so that you can share that space. And there's, that's hard for folks.
Hard. Well, and like, this is a thing I'm noticing that's even bigger than, does the Hobbit get to be Black? It's who is getting the major billion-dollar deals to make things like Rings of Power or the Game of Thrones prequel. It's usually white guys still working with fantasy based in whiteness. And so at some point, the debate over the Black Hobbit is secondary to the larger issue of who's getting the money and the big budgets to imagine whatever kind of world on a screen. And will we ever see a world in which the billion-dollar mega-wattage deal to make a fantasy show goes to a black or brown or anything else fantasy writer? Do you see that happening soon?
I actually think that the debates about these singular or black characters or handful of characters of color in mostly white mainstream fantasy, science fiction, comics, I don't think that it's secondary to the debate of whether we get our shows or more Black Panthers, more Get Outs. Here's why. Let me tell you why. Because they see so much protest every single time that a character of color is cast in these $100 million, $500 million productions. They see this, and they is the powers that be, producers, people who have capital, people who fund these productions. They see this. At the end of the day, some of these people are not so much invested in race as they are in the color green. And so they feel that if you're going to have only a certain part of the audience who will go and turn out to see it, which is why Black audiences in particular, we have been not only loyal, but almost obsessed with, we have got to turn out and make this a success. Because as someone told me 20 years ago when I was trying to publish a fantasy with a Black boy character, a Black boy main character, they told me this: Ebony, you think that you're going to get both Black readers and you're going to get fantasy readers. I disagree. You're going to get Black people who read fantasy. That mentality still prevails. And a lot of the audience, and I can't just say the white audience, a lot of the audience will tune out because of the way they have been carefully taught to view fantasy, science fiction, comics, and all of the imaginative, dreaming genres.
Yeah. You know, how should one watch Rings of Power, given all this baggage? A viewer who says, I see this backlash, it feels kind of weird. Hearing you now talk about how most of Western fantasy is grounded in whiteness, that makes me feel kind of weird too. How do you watch a show like Rings of Power and still just enjoy it in spite of all of that, in spite of the baggage? How do you do it?
I think that you can enjoy it, but it needs to be tempered with other kinds of fantasy. I would encourage people to read and view widely. There has never been a time, never, that we have had so many different imaginative visions of what magic and wonderment and enchantment could look like. Science fiction and fantasy magazines to books, publishing. Finally, the dam has broken and everyone's publishing now. May it continue. May it continue.
The next time I have you on the show, we're going to talk about how one of those black hobbits on this little Amazon show has a nice, tight, clean fade for a haircut. Is there a black barber in Middle-earth? I need to have that explained. That's a different conversation. You know what I'm talking about. He got a nice tight fade.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Right. Yes, I hear you now. I hear
so
the hair is
that's
good.
Our next chat.
Yes,
that's our next chat. Who's doing the hair in Middle-earth? Thanks again to Associate Professor Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. She is based at the University of Michigan. Also, go check out her book on all this stuff. It is called The Dark Fantastic: Race and the Imagination, from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games. Culturegeist. Culturegeist. You're listening to Culturegeist. Culturegeist. I don't know, y'all.
And now to a segment we're calling Culturegeist. About all the things we can't stop thinking about. The culture that's haunting you, haunting me, haunting all of us, for better or worse.
My name is Nicholas Kwa, and I'm a critic at Vulture. So, I don't have much strong feelings about a queen's passing, despite, or perhaps because of the fact that I remain a citizen of the Commonwealth. However, I do have lots of feelings about people groaning over brands and their commemorative death tweets. Personally, I believe we should be giving everyone the space to grieve in their own way, and this includes the brands. After all, corporations are people too, which means brands are people as well, and so are their social media accounts. The whole thing actually makes me think about how I too would like brands to weep and debase themselves when I die. When my time finally comes, I would personally love to get a tweet from a portfolio that includes Monsanto, Burger King, Lowe's Home Improvement, AT&T, and assuming they're still solvent when I die, Warner Brothers Discovery. That would be great.
My name is Carla Caputo. I'm a sex educator from Chicago. And for well over a week now, I've been haunted by an amazing moment from the Foo Fighters' Taylor Hawkins tribute concert at Wembley.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Mr. Shane Hawkins on the drums.
You know, things are bound to be emotional as soon as it's announced that Shane Hawkins is taking over for his late father on the drums for My Hero. But I don't think anyone was prepared for the drum solo at the end of the song. Dave Grohl checks on Shane throughout, but there's this incredible moment where Shane just goes for it. This was an amazing tribute to Shane's late father, Taylor Hawkins, and is the most gorgeous, Pixar-rific performance of father-son love that I've seen since, I don't know, Finding Nemo?
Hello, Sam Sanders. I hope you are doing well. Earlier this summer, Jurassic World Dominion came out, but it just came out on streaming, so I was reminded of this particular scene. The plane is going down. Bryce Dallas Howard is in the only ejection seat between the three of these people on this plane.
I only got one chair and she's in it. You don't have parachutes? I wasn't expecting company.
And, you know, Chris Pratt is trying to get, you got to get off this plane. Relatively normal energy. And then I feel like in what was a strange directorial, acting, editing choice, Bryce Dallas Howard responds with the most energized, exasperated, "What?"
We gotta get you off this plane! What?
That I felt took me out of the movie a little bit, which I think allowed me to enjoy the rest of the movie because it was just more craziness and goofiness at that point. But that has been my Culturegeist. I've been thinking about it ever since I saw it in theaters this summer, and I hope it does something for you. What? Anyway, thank you. Love the podcast.
Thanks again to listeners Trey and Carla and Vulture's Nicholas Kwa. My Culturegeist this week is Cheryl Lee Ralph's Emmy acceptance speech. She won an acting award this week for her work on the amazing Abbott Elementary. It was so well-deserved. Also, she sang. I loved it. Listeners, do you have a Culturegeist, a thing in the culture that has been haunting you for days or weeks or even years? Haunting you in a bad way, haunting you in a good way. Whatever it is, share it with us. The more specific you are, the better. Send us a short voice memo at intoit@vulture.com. INTOIT @vulture.com. All right, Intuit is hosted by me, Sam Sanders. The show is produced by Janae West, Jelani Carter, and Zach Mack. Our editor is Jordana Hokeman. Our engineer is Daniel Turek. Our music is composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I wish they would have had him DJ the Emmys. Would have loved it. Our podcast operations manager is Gabi Grossman. Hannah Rosen is the editorial director of audio at New York Magazine. Listeners, we are back next Thursday with a new episode. Till then, go rewatch Abbott Elementary. Really good show. Really, really good show. All right, bye.